Sacred Beasts. Duels has had these since the Duelist of Shadows box, but they never really saw play. Why is that? Well, we're going to dive into why, and we're going to try and make them more playable. Today we're going to start out a new segment called Workshop Wizard, where we try and take an otherwise pretty much dead archetype or deck or strategy and make it playable? Relevant? We'll see what we can do with it. Some archetypes are harder than others, but basically you get the whole gist of it. So, the Sacred Beasts. What happened to them, right? They were revered to be the ultimate incarnations of the gods for GX, and when we got them in the Duels of Shadows box, they kind of felt flat. And the reason being for this is, though they are somewhat easier to summon than the actual Egyptian god cards in the fact that you can special summon them through tributing whatever they require instead of normal summoning, they're very lackluster in their effects. We're going to start out with Uriah here, Lord of Searing Flames, who says, cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by sending 3 face-up trap cards you control to the graveyard. Keep in mind this doesn't actually have to be continuous trap cards, which is interesting, though most things don't sit on the field unless they are continuous, but you contribute something like Blast with Chain to summon Uriah. The downside, though, is that Uriah only gains 1,000 attack points for each continuous trap in your grave, so if you're tributing non-continuous traps to summon it, it's not going to gain the attack points tributed for it because it's not a continuous trap. Its other effect is once per turn, you can target one set spell or trap your opponent controls, destroy that target, neither player can activate spell or traps in response to this effect's activation. That effect is okay, but destroys the target, so if they have a way to flip that card up before its destruction, it's not going to destroy it. Now, neither player can activate spell or traps in response to the effect's activation, but they could use monster effects, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head here in Speed Duels that would, really screw this card over, but either way, it's not that great. The fact that they don't have immunity, I mean, it's the same with the god cards. Not having immunity minus Obelisk makes the only one that's really playable Obelisk, unless you're playing a dedicated deck like Slifer the Sky Dragon, Revival Jam Control, or something like that. The second one is Raviel, Lord of Phantasms. This one is 4,000, so at least he comes with a beefy attack and defense stat. Can't be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from the hand, contributing 3 Fiend monsters. So it's a little bit easier to summon if you can spam the field on Fiend monsters. What's cool is you can use something like a trap monster in Swamp Mirror, turn it into a Fiend monster on activation, and then that'll count towards it. So you have ways to cheat out things, as well as something like Evil Hero Infernal Prodigy for free tribute fodder, but again, it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. This card says each time your opponent normal summons a monster, you special summon a Phantasm token, Fiend Dark, level 1, attack and defense 1,000, but it cannot declare an attack. Once per turn, you contribute 1 monster. This card gains attack equal to the tribute monster's attack until the end of the turn. So it's definitely better than Uriah, but still's not great, doesn't have protection, and requires a lot to summon it, whereas if you had the ability to summon something like an Infernal Prodigy for free, most of the time you would tribute it for something like an Evil Hero. Malicious Edge has 26, does piercing, is only 1 tribute if your opponent controls a monster, and then gives Infernal Prodigy the extra draw effect at the end phase, which is really nice. Finally, that brings us to the third and final Sacred Beast, Hamon, Lord of Striking Thunder. Now, I've saved him for last because I'd argue he's the most playable of the 3. Once again, cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by sending 3 face-up continuous spells you control to the grave. In itself, that is the easiest thing to summon because you can activate continuous spells on the same turn that you would then drop this. Off continuous traps or face-up traps, you'd have to wait a turn to flip them face-up, and for Raviel, though you have ways to spam multiple monsters in the same turn, they all have to be Fiends. Realistically, you're not summoning 3 Fiend monsters in the same turn that you can then drop him, but with Hamon, you can activate 3 continuous spells, stuff like Shard of Greed, Supply Squad, Cerulean Skyfire, and then drop it immediately. That does require you to have all 3 zones in your spell and trap zones open in Speed Duels, which is kind of annoying because you only have 3 zones, so if any of those zones is occupied, you're not going to be able to do it here. But still easiest one to summon. Then it also says if this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the grave, you can inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. That's pretty nifty in 4,000 life point Yu-Gi-Oh! So that can be definitely relevant. And then while this card is in face-up defense position, monsters your opponent controls cannot target monsters for attacks except this one. Also a decent effect. So cards like Dark Summoning Beast have the ability to cheat any of these out, but if you do so, you can't attack for the rest of the turn. So you'll bring out Hamon in defense mode, and then they're forced to attack it as an attack target rather than anything else you may have on the field. We also have 2 skills that definitely make things easier here. The first is unlocking the power, which activation requirement is at the start of the duel you flip it over, and then it says when you special summon your Ra, Haman, or Raviel using the method on the mentioned card, you can use face-up fiends, continuous spells, and or continuous traps you control, regardless of the card type that the text requires. Interesting here that this says continuous traps versus face-up traps. I think that's just an overlook on Konami's part, but either way, this does allow you to kind of cheat out how you summon these through all of their summoning requirements rather than just one of them. So if you want to draw Haman, tributing a trap, a fiend, and a continuous spell, you can do so. That unfortunately is the only effect of the skill, so it doesn't do a whole lot for you aside from that. But it basically treats these sacred beasts as true Dragos, where you can summon them by tributing anything, continuous spell, continuous trap, or monster. But the monsters, of course, here have to be fiend monsters. The other skill we have is Victory of the Shadow Riders. At the activation requirement, at the start of the duel, you place this face down in the center spell and trap zone. You draw 1 less card at the beginning of the duel. I do give a lot of skills crap when they say that. However, at the start of the first turn of the duel, you flip this over, and when the skill is activated, you add Uriah, Haman, or Raviel from your deck to your hand, so it kind of fixes the -1 card at the start of the duel thing, and gives you one of the Sacred Beasts immediately. The downside is, I don't really want them in my hand to start with at the cost of 1 less card in my hand. I'd rather faster ways to get to something like Dark Summoning Beast, but once per turn, you can discard a card to special summon 1 fiend monster with 0 attack and defense from your grave. Now, it is the grave, not the deck, and it has to have 0 attack and 0 defense. I think the only options we currently have in Speed Duels are Cloudian Ghost Fog, which we are not summoning, Mad Reloader, which is cute if we're trying to draw further into our deck, Goblin King, Puppet Master, which is interesting but requires a lot of dedication to the graveyard. You pay 2,000, target 2 fiends in your grave, special summon those targets, but they can't attack this turn. I mean, then you could tribute the Puppet Master and the 2 things you brought out for Raviel or whatever. And but the most important one, obviously, here is Dark Summoning Beast, is the card you will most likely be summoning, and then Summoning Beast effect will tribute itself to summon one of the 3 Sacred Beasts from your deck, ignoring the summoning conditions. The downside to Victory's effect is that you have to revive a fiend 0/0 attack and defense from the graveyard rather than from the deck, so you'd have to have a way to get them there in the first place. Now, I understand Foolish Burial's at 2, and we do have ways to dump monsters to the grave aside from that, but being that it has to be the grave still requires a bit of setup on your end, and if you don't draw the cards to get to that setup right away, they can just pop this off the field since it starts on the field, and this is another thing I hate about skills that start on the field. But enough explanations, let's get into the actual games and test out a bunch of different ideas. So for the deck list, just Hamon because it's the easiest thing to summon, as we've already stated. We're going to play 3 of it. We're going to play 1 Malicious Edge because we still want some type of way to be kind of offensive to our opponent, and it's 1 Tribute if they have a monster and does piercing. 2 Gillisaurus. We're playing this over Infernal Prodigy because even though Infernal Prodigy does give us a draw if we tribute it for a hero, we've already stated we're only going to play 1 Edge. Plus, this doesn't care how to special summon it, whereas this, you only can summon it if you have no monsters, so this is a lot freer. And yes, our opponent gets to revive a monster from their graveyard, but if you're doing this turn 1, most of the time they don't have a monster, and even if they do, and something comes back, it's just free fodder for Hamon to destroy. Triple Dark Summoning Beast because it is the deck. 2 Fallen Paradise. This card says our opponent can't target our Sacred Beasts with card effects or destroy them by card effects, so it's really, really strong. Also, while we control a Sacred Beast once per turn, we can draw 2 cards, which is absolutely insane. 2 copies of Cerulean Skyfire. It says to special summon Hamon using its own procedure. You can use face down spells you control as well, so you can make something like Fiend Sanctuary actually relevant to be tributed. Not to say it isn't a Fiend already, and we're playing the skill that doesn't care whether we use a spell, a trap, or a Fiend monster, but regardless, gives us a little bit more wiggle room. Also, once per turn when we control an attack position, Hamon, we can negate a spell trap effect activated by our opponent and then change Hamon we control to defense mode. So you're actually going to want to summon Hamon off of Dark Summoning Beast in attack rather than defense like we previously stated to make a card like this more live. Also, this card says if our Sacred Beast leaves the field, we don't take damage for the rest of the turn, which is actually crazy, so it's added protection in the deck. 3 copies of Fiend Sanctuary. This is obviously a Fiend token, but also it's a free token to be tributed no matter what we summon. Most likely it's going to be Summoning Beast to drop this. As I've stated also, it works here and it works here as well. 2 copies of Awakening with the Sacred Beast. This card gains effects based on the number of different named Sacred Beasts you control. We're only getting this effect because we're only playing 1 Sacred Beast, which is each time your opponent normal or special summons, we gain life equal to the attack of the monsters. That's not once per turn, so if they summon multiple monsters, we're gaining all that life that they have in attack points. The second effect is negate activated effects of monsters your opponent controls. We can theoretically get that if we play a different Sacred Beast. I would suggest playing Raviel. Fortunately, in this list, we're just going to play 1, so we're only caring about the first effect, but it just keeps us in the game longer. And then the other effect this has is once per your turn, if you control a level 10 monster, you can add a continuous trap from your grave to your hand. So a really cool way to get these cards back, which is nice. The last effect is any monsters sent to your opponent's grave are banished instead if you have all 3 on the field, but I feel like this is the weakest of the 3 effects, so I'd rather just mainly get this effect, and then if we can activate this effect as well, then we just need to play a different Sacred Beast. 1 Summon Spirit because it's the best tribute summon trap monster in the game that has a secondary effect, and it doesn't need to be a Fiend because of our skill. 1 Metal Reflex Time, same reason, except it's 3000 defense, so it's a wall that they usually can't get over. 2 Metaverse to get our Fallen Paradise a lot faster. And then the side deck, we have 2 Sphere Karibo because in addition to using this as a way to stop an attack, you can also normal summon this and then tribute it because it is a Fiend monster to summon one of your Sacred Beasts. Wall of Illusion, 1850 defense and slows our opponent down by bouncing any monster to the hand that battles it. Spellbinding Circle slows an opponent's monster down and is a continuous trap we contribute. Solemn Wishes, every time we draw a card we gain 500. We draw for turn, gives us 500. We draw a Fallen Paradise, we get 500. If we were playing Supply Squad, we would also get 500 every time we drew off of that, which is crazy, and it's just good in time. And then 1 Unending Nightmare, it's just a really good way to get rid of floodgates off the field by paying 1000 life points to destroy a face-up spell or trap on the field, and this is not once per turn, but it is once per chain. But guys, what do you think? Do you like, love, or hate this deck? I'd love to hear your comments down below. Is there any changes you would like to make? Let me know. Do you like the format of this video? Do you think I should change it? Let me know as well. This is technically episode 1. There was an episode 0 before it was called Workshop Wizard, but we've kindly changed the thumbnail to make it a little bit more authentic. But let me know down below what you thought, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
For more amazing Speed Duel content, subscribe to Yugi Bros. It's time to duel!